summer is going way too fast. I'm a little behind in getting my August planting video out, but I still wanted to share what I am planting in my Zone 6A Ohio garden during the month of August. Now, August in the garden is typically such an amazing, bountiful, sometimes infuriating time of year. There is so much to harvest, and unfortunately at times there are pests and disease and weeds to deal with as well. It's easy to forget how many crops can still be sown during this month. For gardeners in Zone 6, there's often still time to sow a few warm season crops, and it's also an optimal time to put in many of your fall crops. Now, I mentioned it in the prior month's planting video, and I'll say it again. One of the keys to figuring out your timing for planting is to figure out the date of your first estimated fall frost. And one of the easiest ways to do this is just to use the frost calculator on the farmersalmanac.com website. So you just type in your zip code, it'll give you your estimated first fall frost, and you can use that as a jumping off point. I usually use right around October 15th as my estimate here. I'm going to share what I personally plant in August, but there are also a couple of really great tools to help you figure out your specific planting dates. I highly recommend checking out Johnny's Seeds planting calendars, specifically the Fall Harvest Planting Calculator and the Succession Planting Calendar. Both of these allow you to download an Excel sheet. You just plug in your estimated first fall frost date, and it will give you a whole list of planting dates to use for a lot of different crops. One last thing to keep in mind for planting fall crops during August is that if you use season extension methods, so low tunnels, row covers, hoop houses, those types of things, that you can tack on some extra time to those dates. So again, Johnny's gives the general rule that if you're using low tunnels or heavyweight row covers or an unheated hoop house, you can buy yourself about 2 to 3 weeks of extra time that way. So let's jump into the things that can be planted this month. Starting with crops that can be direct sown. At the beginning of August, I still have enough time to direct sow bush beans as well as cucumbers. Now, both of these crops are frost tender, so they will die with the first frost. So you want to look for an early season variety and double check that frost calculator to make sure you have enough time to get a mature crop before your frost hits. I'm also sowing carrots, and carrots are a frost-hardy, cool season crop, but they don't love hot temperatures. So in order to ensure decent germination during the heat of August, I try to keep the soil as moist and cool as possible during that initial germination period. So a drip irrigation or soaker hose, plus some shade cloth, or planting them with another crop shading them during that initial period usually works pretty well for me. In the middle of the month, I'm planting my very last direct sown crop of summer squash and zucchini. Again, that's a frost tender crop, so I opt for the earliest varieties I can find, and you can find some that will mature as quickly as 45 days. In the way of cool season crops, I'm planting beets, which, while a little less finicky than carrots, keeping that soil moist and cool is still a good idea to get good germination on beets. I'm also sowing a lot of my bigger heading type greens, so things like head lettuce, endive, escarole, pak or bok choy, and some early season collards, kale, and chard. Now, these can be started indoors as well, and I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Kohlrabi also, I can do an early season planting either direct sown outdoors or indoors, and now is a great time to start storage turnips. The end of the month is a great time to direct sow quick maturing radishes, leafy greens like your cut and come again type lettuces, arugula, a later planting of chard, kale, collards, mizuna, mustard, and an early planting of spinach. Again, these can be started indoors as well. I also like to start my cilantro, dill, calendula, and bunching onions or scallions. I mentioned that some of these crops can be direct sown outdoors as well as started indoors. The one big reason that I often opt for starting indoors versus outdoors this time of year is that it can be hard to get cool season crops established when it's 1,000 degrees and we're in the middle of a drought, which is often the case during August here. Okay, it's not 1,000 degrees, but We're often in the 90s and it's often very dry. So I'll have better luck getting my seedlings established indoors and then transplanting them out. When I do this, I typically start them 2 to 4 weeks earlier than the direct sown outdoor timing. So a lot of my leafy greens, kohlrabi, the herbs that I mentioned earlier, cilantro, dill, calendula, green onions, a lot of these I'm starting in the beginning to the middle of August indoors. Now another big indoor sown crop for me is my onions for overwintering. And these I start at the beginning of August. I typically shoot for right around August 5th. The other crop is spinach, and I will typically start this indoors towards the end of August. Spinach is very, very cold hardy and does not like the heat at all. So I have better luck pushing that one a little later. The middle of August brings one of the most important planting events for me, and that is transplanting all of my brassicas as well as my bulb fennel. So that's my broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, and my early started kale, collards, and kohlrabi. With these crops, I try to start them from seed indoors at the beginning of July, and they're typically big enough to transplant out by August 15th. Now, I'm running horribly behind and it's already August 23rd and I don't have these in the ground yet. So I'm quickly running out of time. Wish me luck. Now, moving cool weather crops to the garden when it's hot and dry in August can be a bit of a shock for these plants. So to avoid some of the transplant shock, I take some very specific steps when planting these. The first is to give them a very long time to harden off and acclimate to the outdoor temperatures. So I will typically give them a week or more, and I will move them from indoors to my shaded greenhouse to a partially shaded spot in the yard, then to direct sun before planting. The other tactic I like to use is to actually cover these guys with some shade cloth or shade netting for about a week or two after transplanting. And if you're able to put a soaker hose or some drip irrigation along the base of the plants, that is a great option as well. I like to give them a nice long, hours-long drink when they're transplanted, and then at least once a week afterward till the weather cools down a bit. And then at the end of August, I'm focusing on transplanting many of the leafy greens that I started indoors. August is a prime month for planting many cover crops as well. One of my go-to favorites is buckwheat. So buckwheat is a frost tender, heat loving cover crop, and it will frost kill. But the beauty of buckwheat is it is so quick maturing that you can throw it into pretty much any blank spot and it will achieve its full life cycle in just 30 to 45 days. So it's really an ideal crop to use during August because I will just throw it in after many of my main season crops are finishing off. And buckwheat can be planted anytime during the month of August. Now another heat-loving warm season cover crop is sorghum Sudan grass. Again, it's very quick growing, but for optimal biomass, so basically giving it enough time to achieve a large size, I generally don't plant any later than the beginning of the month. Cowpeas are another great warm season cover crop, and I plant these no later than the middle of August. And as far as cool season, fall, or overwintering cover crops go, there's a whole slew that can be planted during the month of August. Now, the ones that I'm going to mention typically can be planted anytime during the month of August. I often wait till the very end, and that is for two main reasons. One is that it is typically easier for me to get them established later in the month as the temperatures start to cool down and the rainfall increases. And the second reason is that they are often not going in till the main season crops have come out. The cover crops that I typically use include a lot of different clovers, things like crimson clover, red clover, sweet clover, and white clover. I also like to use Austrian winter peas, oats, and hairy vetch, and those three actually make a great combo when planted together. Another personal favorite for me is my beloved tiller radish, which helps break up my clay soil. The end of August is a great time for that one as well. And I will often do an early planting of rye as a cover crop. Well, that pretty much covers what I am planting in my garden this month. Share with me in the comments below what you're planting in your garden. And be sure to subscribe to catch next month's episode of what I am planting in Zone 6 in September. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.